let's take a moment to talk about your priority list and how you value and rank your priorities in life. I've got two questions I want you to consider. What's your relationship like with food, and how far down your priority list do we get before you put yourself at the head of the table? It's the latter question that Jonathan McLernon says was a major catalyst for the turnaround in his life. He went on a journey where he lost 100 pounds, where he had to ask the question how much he valued his relationship with food versus the value he placed on himself. It's an emotional and inspirational story we can all benefit from hearing from. And now, as an emotional eating coach, he helps other people ditch those unproven and fad diets in order to make a more meaningful connection with themselves through the value of human connection and reshape the value they place on their own personal growth and worth. I'm Kevin McShad, and I'm ready to bring you this courageously dynamic conversation. McLernon reflected upon how one question changed the trajectory of his life and how he views his personal life priorities and his commitment to being healthy to begin our conversation.
I went through trauma about 10 years ago, and I wasn't really equipped to deal with trauma, so I didn't know how to, and so I chose to eat food. Food became my medication, my source of comfort and escape, and I gained a significant amount of weight because of that. And it was for about 6 years I struggled with my weight. I used to be an athlete, so I struggled and struggled and struggled and couldn't seem to lose weight and successfully keep it off. I would lose some weight, then I would gain it back. But it was when a coach asked me this question, and he said, Jonathan, if you make a list of all the things you love and value, how far down that list do I go before I see your name? And no one had ever asked a question like that before. And what it did, it was highlighting that my struggles were not really with not knowing what to eat or not knowing how to exercise or anything like that. My struggles were with my relationship with myself. And I'd become very angry at myself and my body because it wasn't doing what I wanted it to do. And I really fell into this place of hating myself and hating my body. And I would eat sometimes even just to spite my body angrily. And so this idea that I'm allowed to love and care for and nurture my body was a complete, shift in perspective. And that really changed things for me. So he taught me a lot about self-compassion and self-love, and that it's possible to love ourselves and create positive change in our life.
Yeah, fantastic. Jonathan and I went through a similar journey. My second to last year of elementary school, I was born with cerebral palsy, and the year was 98, and I had just come back from the doctor, and he had told my parents that I'd probably never be able to walk without assistance. And I had to go back to school. I went to the principal, and she could see in my face that it was affecting me. And she told me that the only limits on my abilities and potential are the limits that I put on myself. So I can relate to you in that way for sure.
Yeah, and what a wonderful principle to actually share that with you, and to show you that level of care. And the other part of the question was, what was I running from for most of my life? And that was actually being a coach that works with others. So I've been a nanotechnology researcher at University of Victoria. I've been a marine engineer in the Navy. I've been a globetrotting English teacher. I was an equipment operator in what we call the oil patch out in Alberta. So really, I was doing everything except for the thing that I think I'm born to do, and that's to coach people and to help people. And probably because of my own struggles with myself, even though I knew I had this ability, I didn't feel like I was worth anything, and that nobody would ever hire me to work with them. And so I just went and did other things instead of the thing that I'm really good at.
Yeah, and tell me, how do you think those other experiences, since you brought them up, how do you think they impacted your life for the better?
Well, I think it helped me to understand what it was that I actually want to do. And so, I left the research lab because I didn't want to be, I was getting ready to go into my PhD program in nanotechnology, and I realized I didn't want to do this. And I would have, so I made the hard decision to walk away from that and to join the Navy. And the Navy was good in one sense because the military has structure and discipline and some good experiences and adventures. But again, I found myself really struggling with the politics of it. So the military is still a very political type institution. So that actually led us to traveling around the world. My wife is from Australia, and so we took a trip for about 3 years, traveled around the world, lived in different countries, taught English and whatnot. And it was on our travels that I had the most difficult experience in my life. And so all of that really, I would say, it shaped who I am today, and I wouldn't trade the difficult experiences I've had, because without them, I wouldn't have the level of compassion and understanding that I do now.
Absolutely. And now you're on a mission to help people uh, similar to yourself lose weight and sort of leave the was ineffective diet in the rear view mirror. So I'm wondering if you could tell me more about that.
Yeah, so the idea of a diet, just to give people a bit of background, the idea of a diet is a temporary change in behavior with an attempt or a hope that it would achieve a permanent result. And that's a flawed idea. It's never going to work. The other idea behind a diet is that you follow somebody else's rules for your life, and by following those rules, starting from day one, that somehow you're going to become this, I don't know, a virtuous eater or something like that. And human beings, we value our independence and our autonomy, and it doesn't take very long for us to be grow pretty sick of trying to follow someone else's rules for our life. If we want to create permanent change, we have to create a permanent lifestyle change. In other words, we have to live differently, not just for 12 weeks or 90 days or something like that, but we have to create a lifestyle that we can keep living. And the fundamentals of being healthy, in one sense, they're not overly complicated. It's healthy food, quality sleep, regular activity, hydration, and managing your stress. But it's how do we turn that into a lifestyle for the individual, one that they can keep doing, one that they enjoy, but not one that they feel like they're deprived and suffering for the rest of their life.
And through your company, Freedom Nutrition Coaching, you marry the science of metabolism with the psychology of behavioral change and the compassion of human connection to create life changing and transformative and transformation. So I'm wondering if you can tell me how you work most effectively with your clients.
Yeah, and that's a really great question. So it is important to acknowledge that we need to take some steps to help our metabolism function better, and we can do that. It's not nobody's metabolism is broken. Our metabolism responds to the instructions we give it. So if we choose to be active and we choose to eat low quality food, our metabolism will respond accordingly. But ultimately I focus on what we call brain driven weight loss. So it's the brain is the driver of our behaviors. The brain is what really it's our sense of identity, our beliefs about ourselves, our habits, our psychology, our mindset, and our emotions. These are what actually drives our behavior. And so when we acknowledge that, either through both psychology of behavior change and the compassion of human connection, because the other part of it is when we try to change by ourselves, it's extremely difficult because it requires us to become vulnerable, and human beings like to be connected to other human beings. When we're alone and trying to change, our primal brain will resist that. It will say this is too much, and almost like we become frightened and we return to old habits and old behaviors. So then when you connect to another human being who, say through the coaching process, who creates the space for you to be vulnerable, makes it, could we say, it might sound funny to say this, but make it safe to change, because we have a primal biology that fears change. So when we make it safe to change, now it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to, I call it, wrestle with your demons in the light, wrestle with your struggles in the light, and not be judged for it. Now we're able to really create that permanent transformation.
Absolutely. And I'm curious because you've got a fascinating personal story of losing over 100 pounds yourself. So I'm wondering how the journey of getting to that point has affected you emotionally and affected or impacted the work you do today.
Man, you ask really great questions.
Well, I appreciate that.
Well, when I gained the weight, it was because I didn't know how to deal with my heavy emotions from trauma. So trauma, nothing really prepares us for it. And for me, I was almost beaten to death when I was living in South Africa, and without being equipped to deal with it, my natural instinct was to just try to run away from it and escape it, and food allowed that. Then came the process of trying to lose weight, but everything that I was trying to do wasn't addressing the root cause. It's if I go keto, or if I go paleo or vegan or primal, and I tried all these different diets, and I ran a supplement store, so I tried all the supplements that were available too, and none of them were working because I wasn't addressing the real problem, and that was my relationship with food and what I was using it for, and my relationship with myself. But because I've had those struggles, maybe I could say this: before I had my own struggles with weight, when I was an athlete, I would have just said anybody who was overweight was lazy or undisciplined. Now that I've had my own struggles with it, I realize there's much more to the picture, and that's why compassion is so important. And compassion is not meant to be could we say, a get out of jail free card. What it is it's recognizing that in the struggle of trying to change, we're going to make mistakes. We're going to fall into old behavior patterns. It doesn't make us a failure. And so just recognize the common humanity of each person struggling and trying to create positive change in their life. Yeah, and so brain-driven weight loss is kind of a term that I've coined, just to really acknowledge the fact that, as we've been touching on, it's the brain that creates our behavior. The brain is like the control center. And so if, for example, when I was overweight, I had this sense of identity. I was the jolly fat guy. And so if that's how I see myself, then my behavior is going to match my sense of identity. And if my behavior doesn't match my sense of identity, I will rebel against it. So trying to lose weight when I still felt like I was the jolly fat guy meant that I would sabotage my efforts to go back to being the jolly fat guy. And it sounds interesting, or listening to it, you might think, well, that doesn't really make sense, or I'm not sure how that makes sense. But again, it goes back to kind of our primal biology. When we have a sense of identity, our brain wants to keep that stable. So our brain will push us to reinforce that to be true. So if I believe that I'm the jolly fat guy and that people like me because I'm the jolly fat guy, I will continue to act in congruence with that. So I'll eat lots of food. I'll pretend that I love eating lots of food, and pretend that I love being the big fat guy and I'm not bothered by it. When the truth is, inside, I really struggled with it, and I really did not like being overweight. But I didn't feel like I could get out of it. I didn't feel like I was ever going to be able to lose the weight. And so that was my compensation.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about compensation and feeling good about yourself through food. And I know for you, it's also important to help people sort of break the cycle of nighttime eating and snacking in order to get on the other side of weight loss. So I'm wondering if you could tell me all about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, um, we kind of have, I've been sort of alluding to, and I should speak a little more clearly about it. We kind of have what I call like a primal brain, and we have a logical sort of calculating brain. So the front part of our brain in our forehead, we would call it the prefrontal cortex. That's the part where we consider the consequences of our actions. That's our prefrontal cortex. We could call it the thinking brain. Um, when our brain is fresh, like let's say you've had a good night's sleep and your brain is fresh, that part of your brain works really well. But as we get more tired as the day goes on and we make more and more decisions over the course of the day, that part of our brain becomes more and more tired. And it could we say it offloads responsibility to the more primal brain. And that's the part of our brain that just wants to avoid discomfort and seek out comfort. So let's say it's 8 o'clock at night. You know, you're feeling kind of tired and low energy and not wanting to do anything, but it's kind of maybe too early to go to bed. And so you turn to eating food to change the channel in your head, give you a little bit of a boost. But at nighttime, when it's the emotional brain making the decisions, it's going, I want to eat something that tastes good and makes me feel good. Nobody's craving broccoli at 8 o'clock at night, right? So just recognizing that that's the natural tendency of our brain. It's not a failure. It's not a flaw. That is what our brain does. And so for myself, for example, I just put the boundary in place that I don't eat after 8 p.m. It's not that I follow it 100% of the time perfectly, but I just recognize my own tendency to make bad food choices after 8 o'clock. And so I say, as a general rule of thumb, I don't eat after 8 p.m.
Implement the same rule with apple pie. You know, that's my weakness spot. But other than that, I'm good with not after eating after 8 o'clock. So there you go.
Yeah, well, apple pie is delicious, and it is a comfort food, right? So the other thing to think about is that food is not just fuel. Maybe you've heard the expression, you know, food is just fuel. And I go, well, no, that's not true. Food is history, it's culture, it's family, it's being social. We gather around mealtime together as human beings. If you travel to another country, they'll share with you their cuisine, which will be different than ours. And so we want to recognize that food provides more for us than just calories to eat. It provides us a degree of human connection and comfort, and there's a social aspect to it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything in moderation, right, Jonathan?
Yeah, you got it, man. Moderation is even moderation in moderation.
Absolutely. Hey, Jonathan, I'm curious to ask you personally if you have any non-negotiables, and what I mean by that is, do you have anything you put in your daily routine or nightly routine that you're unwilling to compromise on that you've seen for yourself has led to success in your personal or professional life?
Well, every morning I have morning snuggle time with my wife and my son, who, as of recording this, is just over 6 months old, and you know, professional life and business matters, but there can be a temptation to let it take over and take away from the most important things in life. I love what I do. I love my work. I love my clients, but I love my family first. And so it's important that every day I make time to spend with my wife and I make time to spend with my son. And that's absolutely non-negotiable. Sorry, I was going to say I also use a little habit tracker called Loop. It's an app for Android, and there's just a couple of things I tick off every day, and they might seem like little things, but they're like little investments in my health. So it's like drink 1 liter of water in the morning before 10 a.m., brush my teeth. That's an act of self-care. Go for a 10-minute ride on my bike or go for a 10-minute walk. So just get some morning movement in. And then in the evening, it's stop eating at 8 p.m. So these are just the simple things. But when I feel, you know, like spending time with my family makes me feel complete. It makes me feel loved. I get to share love. I'm no longer turning to food so much to meet that need because I'm connecting with the most special people in my life. And so I think that's why they're non-negotiables for me.
Through the pandemic and the last year and a half that we've all had, I think the value of human connection face to face, I don't think a lot of people will take that for granted anymore, huh?
Absolutely agree, man. We just it's like the most like we're social creatures. We really benefit from connecting to other human beings, and isolation and loneliness really it's we could even say it's a killer. It causes our health to suffer dramatically, and on the flip side of it, when we're connected to other human beings, our health flourishes.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jonathan, tell me, I'm curious to know if you've given any thought to how you want your personal or professional legacy to be defined there, buddy.
that's a that's a really good question. I said really, if I can positively impact one life, if one person will say, hey, you know what, I was really glad that he worked with me and he changed my life, I think it will be complete. There are big goals that I have that I want to accomplish, but I'm not so worried about them being my legacy. I want to be remembered as, as a family man, so someone who put my family first, who cared for them, a man of integrity, and so that's I honor my word, and um, really compassion. I'd like to be known as someone who practiced compassion towards myself and towards everybody that I met.
Absolutely. And Jonathan, just finally tell me if people want to get connected with you, buddy, what's the best way they can accomplish that goal?
I do have a podcast called Wellness Unplugged, so they could just go to freedomnutrition.rocks, ROCKS, slash wellness unplugged. I like to say this is about conversations between the before and after. So, talking to people about the reality of trying to create change in their lives. Freedomnutritioncoach.com is my website, so you can learn a little bit more about the work that I do there. And if anybody does struggle with, say, nighttime eating and cravings and boredom eating and that kind of thing, I do have a free guide called Crush Your Cravings. And again, you can go to freedomnutrition.rocks slash crush your cravings and enter your email address, and I'll send you a free copy of that.
Fantastic. Well, Jonathan, I have to tell you, I thoroughly enjoyed our time together. I want to wish you all the best of luck with the great work that you're doing to impact people in their journey with weight loss. And I want to thank you for joining me this afternoon. It's most appreciated.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I hopefully will bring you to be a guest on Wellness Unplugged.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always willing to return the favor from one podcaster to another. Absolutely, buddy.
All right. Take care, man. Thank you so much.